Welcome to What's the Point? I'm Bill Ellis. Each week I talk with people about the moments that shape them, the choices that change them, and what those stories might spark in you. So with that said, let's get into today's conversation. Have you ever found yourself doing something you've been doing for years and realized that it's quietly changed? Nothing's broken, but it feels not quite the same as it did at the beginning. So what do you do with that? Do you start again, or do you find a way to keep it alive? Because staying with something isn't the same as standing still. Welcome to What's the Point? I'm your host, Bill Ellis, and my guest today is Susan Friedmann. Susan spent more than 3 decades in publishing, written 18 books, and built a successful business, Aviva Publishing, working with authors and entrepreneurs to turn their ideas into books that build credibility, voice, and business. Today, we're exploring what it really takes to keep something going over time without it becoming stale or stuck, but instead steadily successful. Susan, welcome to What's the Point?
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Bill.
It's great to have you here. So let's start kind of at the beginning. If someone asks you, Susan, what do you do? What do you say?
I say that I help nonfiction authors help them and their book find the right avenue, find a niche in the marketplace where they can really exhibit their expertise and get paid for it.
I bet they really like that last part.
They do, because most authors, unfortunately, don't make money with their book.
That's exactly right. And that's a good point. I shouldn't be chuckling at that because I know from personal experience, the book I published, I didn't do with the intent of making money, much less a lot of money. But the thought is just like when you and I do our podcast, I don't know if you get this question a lot. I do. It's like, well, have you monetized it? Well, no, it's not that easy. And that's not my point. But when people do come to you, what are they really looking for? Is it really about writing the book? Or is it about something they think the book will give them?
It's what the book will do for them.
Okay.
And that's, in fact, one of the starting questions when an author comes to me. And they come to me with a finished manuscript. I don't take them through the process. So I start when they've actually finished their manuscript. And then we look at the editing and the designing, etc. But my love and real passion is to help them with the marketing. There are plenty of publishers out there, but the book marketing part, where they really identify what it is they want the book to do for them. What do they want to get out of it? I mean, most people, well, I've got a message that I want the world to hear. Great. Unfortunately, marketing to the world is really tough. Not even Procter & Gamble or Microsoft or Nike or any of the big giants try and do that. So right up front, I was like, okay, we've got to look at where's a vertical, where's a niche market where you can sort of get rid of the competition and really focus and look to be an expert authority, a thought leader in your marketplace. And that's really essential. And unfortunately, Bill, authors haven't really thought that through. They think, I've written a book, I'm going to post it on Amazon, and somehow it's going to get discovered.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen, or very rare. I won't say it won't happen, but very, very rare.
It's definitely an outlier if that happens, and it happens even more rarely than people are thinking of it when you say that. One of my friends and former guest, John David Mann, who is a New York Times bestseller on multiple books, took him countless submissions to get his first book accepted at the Go Giver. And once it did, it has since sold millions, but it wasn't like, oh, here, we've written a book, it's going to be great, and it is. No. So getting back to how you start with your clients, I think it's great because in essence, what you ask them is, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
In essence, you're saying, what is the point? What do you want out of it? And that needs a lot of clarification. But let me go back even prior to that, Susan. You said that you don't work on the process of them. They come to you with a finished manuscript. How challenging is it to market something that may not be, in your view, as solid or as effective as it could be? So do you ever read that manuscript and go, oh boy, I can't help you with this, or we need to change this?
Put the ball in the author's court. I don't do the marketing. I guide them in the marketing process as to what they can do. So I want the author to feel passionate about what they have. That they feel that it's really solid. Have they tested it with their target audience? I probably am not their target audience. More often than not, I'm not. So, can I judge if this is good, if this is right information? I actually am very reliant on the author and the editing process. So I've got some very good editors who I work with, and I rely on them to help guide the author, in correcting anything or taking out what is too much, because more often than not, you write more than is necessary. I mean, we need people's attention span these days is very low. So we need something they can get through very quickly. So we don't want to, have them to plow through a nonfiction book that looks like War and Peace. That's not what it's about.
Right.
Let's give them the information and give it to them solidly. And I'm, putting my money on the fact that they've got what it takes. And I know that sort of very early on. One of the things that I am most particular with the author, and that is their cover. They have to be 110, 120% in love with that cover. If they do not love the cover, and that is the packaging, they're going to be embarrassed about how they put it out there. So every time, and I've had authors, I've got colleagues who say, you know what, I've got a book, but I'm not really happy with it, so I don't sell it. Okay. Why? And it's often the cover. I didn't like the cover. So I will not let an author put the book out there if they are not totally in love with that cover and that they've tested it with their target audience. Because again, we fall in love with our own stuff often, and it may not be right for our target audience.
That is so true. You make a great point that the cover is essential, because that's true and was perhaps even more true when most books were sold retail, but even online sales. When you're having things submitted to you for, here's a recommendation for you from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you buy your books, you get a postage stamp size picture.
Yes.
And if that doesn't draw you in, you're not going to look at what the substance of the book is. So bringing these two topics back together, the cover and the substance of the book, you've already said that they bring you a completed manuscript. So are you as committed and adamant about them loving the manuscript and the content as you are about them loving the cover? Because if not, if the cover's beautiful and the content doesn't stack up, that's a failure. If the content is beautiful and the cover's no good, that's a failure. So they have to work in tandem, right?
Totally, totally. And often my first conversation with people is actually over the phone. And I listen for their passion about their project, especially when they're talking about, and I ask them, as I said at the beginning, what do you want the book to do for you? And if it's flat, oh, well, I wanted to write this book. And if I don't get that excitement, I'm like, this is going to be a challenge, not only for me, but for you, which is much more important, because I'm going to guide you in the marketing, but I'm not going to do it for you. And if it's not successful, I don't want to take that responsibility.
When you speak to someone, when someone gets in touch with you, Susan, initially, and they don't have a manuscript, Do you say you go out and produce one, or do you suggest resources for them? You said you have brilliant editors that you rely on. Do you have people that can help guide them through the
Absolutely.
production?
Absolutely. You know, you name it, I've probably got somebody that I know. I always say to people, I'm a great resource,
Yeah.
you know, because I know, I feel very grateful. I know a lot of people in a lot of different areas, especially obviously in the publishing world, and I refer people. I've got a list of people who I love to refer, you know, be it people who will help them with the writing process, the designing to the editing, the designing, and, you know, everything else.
Love to hear you say that, and it's a great takeaway for myself and all of the listeners too, Susan. And that is, if you don't know how to do it, don't say you know how to do it, because you're not being true to yourself. And so when people do come to you and they bring the book and you get to the point, uh, I've got this book that the world needs to read, or whatever the case might be. What do the authors that come to you get wrong about what they're thinking or what they're hoping the book will do? What's a common thing that they misfire on?
Well, first of all, as I said earlier, is that they think their book is for everyone. Because, you know, the second question that I ask people, Bill, is always, who is this book for? So what do you want the book to do for you? And then who's it for? And I would be a very rich lady if I had $100 for everybody who said, my book is for everyone. And yes, it might be. But as I said, you can't market to everyone. So if the greats can't do it, why should we, as a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a small business owner? Those are usually my people. And yeah, so we've got to narrow it down. Who is this? Who can you really, you know, get your arms around? You know, if somebody says to me, oh, my book is for women between 20 and 50. Well, a woman between 20 and 50, very different from somebody who may not be in a relationship to somebody who might be an empty nester. You know, there's this huge gap. So we've got to narrow this down.
Okay.
So I work with them on that because often that is a big mistake they come to me with.
Okay. And getting that kind of clarification is ideal. I applaud you for having that talent and that skill and the willingness to put that out to people, which has me build on the question I just asked. What do people tend to get wrong? Part of that is what we touched on earlier, Susan, that it's going to sell 1 million copies and I'm going to retire with a yacht and an island.
Yep.
Do you run across too many people that you have to say, no, this is not going to be your answer to retirement? And if so, do people get disillusioned and walk away? Or do most of them say,
Sometimes. No.
yeah,
I mean, I think deep down people know they're just sort of kidding themselves that they see successful authors and they say, well, I've got a book, I can write that, or I've got this, and I'll be like that person. But what they don't see is the backstory, the effort it takes. You know, for instance, marketing is a long game.
mm,
You know, so many authors say to me, oh, well, you know, I tried being on podcasts, I did a few and it didn't work. It didn't sell any books.
mm-hmm,
I tried a few articles, I did all the social media and nothing worked. I'm like, it's it's this continuity, it's this consistency, uh, being out there constantly in the public eye, or at least the people who you want to see, who you're interested in, you know, marketing to, that they're seeing it. And there's just no end. I mean, people think that the end of the line is the publishing the book. That's just the beginning of the
mm.
journey. And people say, well, how long should I keep marketing my book? And my question is, how long do you want to be selling the book? You know, I mean, you can't just say, oh, well, I'll market it for 3 months. And if it doesn't take off, oh, well, I will stop marketing it. It doesn't happen that way. It's a long game.
understand that. And again, my asking you what your experience is when you share that with people that go, yeah, that's not what I'm here for. I can't commit that much time. Do people walk away when you say that, or do they just,
Sometimes they do. I may not be the right fit. I'm not the right fit for everybody, and that's okay. I'm okay with that,
yeah.
you know, and I feel good about saying it because that wasn't always the way. Yeah. I mean, you talk about, trying to do things that you don't necessarily have the expertise in, but think, oh, well, I'll manage to
Mhm.
find the expertise if I take this client on.
Mhm.
That doesn't work. And it's
Typically not.
super stressful.
Yeah. And just to go back and expand on that, Susan, that the question is, that's not your style, but as much as anything, people that come to you because they've been referred to you or for reasons where they have a belief in you. But
Hmm.
when they hear you say, this is the long game, this is a lot of time, does not you personally, but does the concept of the long game and a lot of effort in marketing, does that have many people walk away?
No, I think because we look to really break it down and make it manageable. I'm not going to suggest to anybody to do something that they don't feel comfortable doing.
Mhm.
Now, so many of my authors want to be speakers. They want to get on the speaking circuit, but not everybody does. Maybe they want to do training instead. I never wanted to be a keynote speaker, but I love training.
Mm.
So I was in the training, that was my passage, my pathway. Some people just want to do coaching. So we're looking at how can they, or maybe get more clients. How can they do that with the book? So then we look at how can we make that work that they feel comfortable with it.
Mhm.
Because if I'm going to tell you to do something that you don't want to do, guess what? You're not going to do it.
That's- And
Chances are high.
and anyone that comes to you that's a parent knows that. Oh. What 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 this does, though, Susan, is reinforces to where we started when you said, well, your very first thing is to say, what are your expectations? What are you trying to accomplish? So all of that leads into this. And that's a difficult sometimes, but essential service and process that you find. And having the ability to go through and listen with understanding and then bring your expertise in such a way that it's going to be heard is brilliant. And that's probably why you've been so successful at this for so long. But when you started, let's go in the Wayback Time Machine. When you started, what did you think you were building, or what was your vision?
What was my vision? My vision was to help people be successful. And I wasn't in the publishing business for other people. I was in the publishing business for my own books because interestingly enough, and turning the clock back, I started out in the speaking business. And when I went to belong to the National Speakers
Mhm.
Association, a proud member for over 35 years, and I asked one of, the stalwarts there, I said, give me some advice. And the gentleman said, write a book. I was like, that was the furthest thing from me. You're asking me to do something that, that wasn't what I was wanting you to tell me. But I took his advice. And what I found was my area of expertise was in the trade show industry, was working in that area for many years, doing training. I was training exhibitors how to be successful on the trade show floor. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book in this area. And so he said, well, you don't have to be published, or you can self publish. And this was, 30 years ago.
Mm.
And being self published, that didn't exist in the same way that it does now. And I know that you self published your book. But so I was like, I'm going to find a publisher. And so I looked high and, looked for somebody who had my style. I'm a very tips and techniques, these are the 5 ways to do this. These are the
Mhm.
6 ways to do that's my style. Yeah.
Okay.
And I found a company called Chris Publications. They aren't in business anymore, but at the time they were very big. They had what they call the 50-minute books. You could read a book in 50 minutes, cover
Mm.
to cover, right up my alley. So of course I tried to get a contract with them, and they turned me down 3 times. Well, for many authors looking for a publisher, that's not a lot, but they eventually took a risk on me. And I think they were pleased they did, because we sold 500,000 copies to one company.
Wow.
And so they were involved in it.
Yeah. Well, not only is that a tremendous story of success, it really underscores what you've been saying in our whole conversation and what you say to everyone that there's a commitment here. And if you get turned down 3 times, you know, bring it back a fourth time if you believe in it and that kind of thing. And but you made another really important point, and that is being turned down 3 times isn't that much.
Nothing.
But so your personal experience is terrific to share with whomever your clients are. Saying, I'm not just telling you this, I know this from personal experience. That is so powerful. That is so powerful. When you started, where you are now, is it different than where you started? Is what it's become morphed quite a bit?
It's it's a much more challenging marketplace. By the way, what I forgot to mention was the fact that I started Aviva Publishing, which is now Aviva Publishing and Marketing. I started it to publish my own work, because other than Chris Publications, most publishers are not interested in books on trade shows. And I wanted to do more books. So I started my own publishing company, never thinking that I would publish anybody else's work. But when, I had a couple of book coaches who came along and said, would you publish my work? And would you publish, my client's work? And I was like, I don't see why not. So, yes, I mean, things morphed and they grew. I mean, now, what, 30 plus years later, we published over 1,200 titles.
That's impressive. So I was going to ask if there was a point when you realized that something had shifted, and you've just answered that question, at least over a period of time. How long did it take for it to sink into you that, the opportunity here is a lot bigger than me publishing my own books? I can, not that you necessarily were thinking I can get 1,200 titles published, but when did it occur to you that, I know how to do this and help others in addition to myself?
There was a turning point. I was in the trade show industry for about 25 years, and it got more and more challenging. And then I, I really sort of had this feeling I'd lost my passion for what I was doing. And I knew then that if I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, it was getting harder and harder. And I had to let it go. And I looked around and thought, what can I do? And in fact, it was my daughter who said to me, you've got this publishing company. You're publishing for other people. Why don't you do that? You love marketing. Why don't you do that? I was like, duh. Why not? She's my biggest critic, of course, but that's okay.
It's great to have a critic that cares about us
I
and has
know.
insights and isn't afraid to say things like that will make us go, duh,
Yeah,
if we're
exactly.
open to it.
Exactly.
So it's interesting. You're kind of touching on this, but you've been in basically the same space for a long time, the publishing business, whether it's for yourself or for others. And we've talked about how that evolved. But in general, how do you know when something needs to change or when you need to stick with it?
I think, this idea of if you're not excited, if you don't get out of bed excited about what you're doing, that's the time to say, there's something wrong here. And we need to look at what needs to change, because I was always passionate about the industry and what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I really just had to admit to myself, which was hard. And to be honest, it took almost 5 years before
Mm.
I sort of allowed myself to let that go. I was the trade show coach. That was who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hiding behind that title, and then it went away. It's almost like people who are going into retirement now and who all of a sudden or have been laid off. They lose that title, they lose that identity. And I had to establish a new one for myself. And that's not easy, especially the older you get.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start all over again. I was like, that was really tough. Really, really tough.
I've gone through that, as have many friends and clients, and it's 100% true. And it gets back to the core of this show and the core of where you start with your business, and that is, what's the point? I mean, why are we doing things? And if it's not there, if the excitement's not there, something has to change, or just realize you're going to be miserable as long as it continues.
That's not what I want. I want
Exactly.
to
So,
enjoy my life. And
yeah.
what I'm doing is part of my enjoyment. I mean, my husband says to me, when are you going to retire? I was like, I see that. Not in the near future, because
Yeah.
what am I going to do? Then I'm going to find something else to do. But I love what I do. And as long as that lasts, I'm going to continue doing this.
I love that answer. I really love that answer. Thank you for being so open with that, because there doesn't have to be an end to the runway, but staying in it and staying excited. And you've touched on this a little bit, but go a little bit deeper for us, please, Susan, on what have you had to adapt? How have you had to adapt over the years? Now, so by example, you talked about self-publishing 30 years ago versus self-publishing today. What are some of the things you've had to adapt to in your world?
I mean, just simply, the use of the computer and the internet. I mean, this was all new once upon a time. And seeing that evolve, in fact, I was talking to my husband the other day about memories of that old computer that he had in the bedroom, where he would just play one of these games like the Mario Brothers games or something. And I was like, oh my goodness, that was like the thing at the time. And we'd come so far. And then now, of course, with I mean, the whole publishing industry has been turned on its head.
Hmm.
The fact that people can write a book in a weekend, or just go into chat and say, write me a book, or Claude, or, doesn't mean it's good. But there's a lot of not such good stuff. And I was going to use a word didn't want to use, but there is a lot of bad stuff out.
Use whichever word you're comfortable with. We'll adapt. But do tell us, go a little deeper on that. The impact of AI, on the one hand, might make it simpler
Yeah.
to come up with a manuscript and maybe a cover.
Mm.
But, but how do you see that impacting not just the industry, but results?
Well, unfortunately, there is a lot of bad stuff out there, and it's being churned out, which makes it that much harder, more challenging for authors rather, who are putting out good stuff.
Mm.
That's why, my whole philosophy is going down that vertical niche market, because then you're looking for people who are really interested in your topic area,
Mhm.
and where you can be the thought leader in that area. And so, even more so now, it's so important for authors to be able to do that with their work. If they want to make an impact, if their passion is there and they really want to share what they have, their expertise, and they can influence others, then you have to really narrow down your focus. So that's what I spend a lot of time on. People want to be the Amazon bestseller, and they want to be the New York Times bestseller. And you said you've got a colleague who was a New York Times multiple bestseller, which is like amazing because usually, it's unless you're published by a traditional publisher and they're going to help make it happen, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So often there's so much delusion about what really this world is about and how to be successful in it. And it takes work. I mean, every successful person has got that backstory of, how many years it took to be successful. I had a coach, a mentor, who said to me, it takes 15 years to become an overnight success. It was like, oh my goodness. And then, when I mention that to people, they're like, oh, that was a little longer than I was anticipating. I thought it might happen in 3 months.
Or overnight.
Oh, we're overnight, yeah.
So you've mentioned, Susan, that you have adapted quite a bit and things have changed a little bit in how you are forced to and experienced to move in a new direction. What have you what have you deliberately not changed?
That's a good one. What have I deliberately not changed? I think just that philosophy of continuing to enjoy what I do. Because again, I want that to be the continuum. I want that to be something that endures while I'm doing it. Because as I said, once I lose the passion, I need to keep myself excited about what I do. I get bored with myself very easily. So I've got to keep getting excited and finding ways to be excited.
Okay.
So if that's not happening, then we're in trouble.
Okay. This question, Susan, is for you, but I'm asking it after our conversation more so with the listener in mind, because you kind of just answered this, but there are moments when things seem stale. And what do you do with that? And what are your thoughts on sharing with other people, your clients, that, the long game of marketing, as you call it, can start to get stale? How do you adapt it? What do you do in your own situation? And how do you help others when it gets quote unquote stale?
Yeah. So my remedy for myself is to find something creative. Look at something creative. Look at how I love, writing articles. And now with the help of, Chat and Claude and any of the AI platform is looking at, give me a different, take on this. And so they come up with something that I'd never thought of. And I was like, wow, that gets my juices going.
Okay.
And so this is where, these tools are invaluable. We can get very myopic about our own stuff very easily. So I believe for me, if it works like that for me, how can it do that for my clients as well? Because you're right. I mean, I've got a membership group, my author influencer circle, and many times we meet twice a month, and many times my members come to me and they say, Susan, this just isn't working. And I don't know what to do. So let's talk it through. Let's see, how can we change it? How can we look at it from another angle? We all see things a little differently. And I like to pick other people's brains too. I mean, I hate that expression, but yeah. I tell you, I mean, you do this incredible podcast, and I've got mine, my book marketing mentors, which I've been doing now for 10 years. And I love interviewing people just like you. And I'm always learning from them. So that helps to get me excited too. So I don't say you should start a podcast to do that, but
No, but what I hear you saying is, if it's stale, shake things up or explore how to make it unstale.
yeah.
And what you've touched on in the last several minutes is the potential downside as well as the upside of AI. The downside is people using it to write a book and kind of take the easy way, and that's that's not going to work for them more often than not, and it's going to be a degradation to the publishing world, I believe. But the benefit of AI, I mean, just to get new ideas, and I'm just going to go a little bit deeper on that myself. I love the thought and the fact that you use AI to get some fresh ideas and how you like getting insights from other people. I've not used the AI the way you have, but I love talking to other people and saying, what can happen here? So you've just expanded something for me and hopefully my listeners as well. So thank you for that. So stepping away from just book publishing, in other
Mhm.
words, getting bigger, from everything you've seen, what's just in general, what's something that works versus something that just exists? What's the difference between something working and something existing?
I think, without sounding like a stuck record, it's how you feel about it.
Mhm.
I mean, it all starts with us. And we've got to be real with ourselves as how does this feel in terms of does it excite you? Because if you, as I say, if you're not excited about something, you're not going to do it. So you've got to love what you do. And if you don't, change it and find something that is going to give you that satisfaction. I think that's what we need. And that's getting harder these days too, because there's so much noise out there and we get, pulled into social media and we think that's doing something for us. And I don't believe that it is necessarily, other
Mm.
than, taking time out of our day where we could potentially be doing something a little bit more productive, exciting for ourselves. Go
Yeah.
have a massage. Go have a facial, ladies or men, take a class that gives you something different. I love looking at what I do from another angle. I'll
Hmm.
go into another industry completely and say, what are they doing that I might be able to adapt for
Mm.
authors, for their marketing? So I look around me and the world. I mean, we've got so much going on around us and so much that's successful. You know, how is Taylor Swift doing it? She's so successful. What can an author learn from what she's doing to be able to enhance their own success?
You got a theme of learning that
Oh,
is amazing. And it is both inspirational and impressive.
thank you.
What have you come to understand about people through your work? I mean, build on what you've been talking about because you talk about learning a lot but from people and your work, what are some of the things you've taken from that?
I You always think that people are like you, oh, you enjoy doing this. And there are a lot of people who are like, no, I don't want to do that. And they're stuck. They get stuck in their own thinking about what's going on, or, you know, I'm never going to make it. I've tried things and this doesn't work for me. I had somebody on my class, a master class yesterday, who said, "Oh, I've been in through podcasts and they cost so much," and I was like, they shouldn't. And if you really wanted to do it, there's another way. But I don't believe that they really want to do it enough to search for another way.
Mm.
There are too many people out there looking for the silver bullet, the magic potion. And I've done it. It's not that I haven't done it, but I now see more
Mhm.
that I'm doing it and why I do it or have done it in the past, because
Mhm.
that was definitely my modus operandi is like, oh, well, let me find, somebody who can do it quicker, better, faster. Let me buy that product. Let me do
Mm.
this. I mean, I'd also be a very rich woman if I hadn't invested in all these other people as well.
Yeah, the old woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Exactly.
So Susan, you've had a very long career and along with that, a very long marriage. And I just want you to build on this concept because I think it's really important. What allows something to last without it becoming static?
Where you say a long marriage, my son, both my kids have asked us, well, what's the secret
Mm,
to, being together so long? And for me, the answer was communication.
mm,
Can we communicate honestly with each other? And I'm sure that that has, and I sort of deviated maybe a little bit from what you were asking, but I believe that that communication and being honest not only with others but with yourself. I mean, it starts with yourself. If you're not honest with yourself and trying to be somebody you're not, and trying to do something that you can't do necessarily, and again, I've played all these roles. It's not that this is what happens over the years, as you
mhm.
know, Bill. I mean, we're both, I think, very similar age group, and then it's like, okay, so that didn't work. So
Mhm.
let's look at what does work. And so that honesty, ha- values as well, always come into play. What's most important in your life? I mean, my family is very important to me. Very important. You know, would I give up work for it? I've not at times, and it's come back to haunt me. Where the kids say, "Oh, you never came to the match, and you never did this, and you never did that." It's like, oh my goodness. I was trying to make a living. I was trying to
Mhm.
help put food on a table. So, yeah, I don't
Has
know.
it
I
been your?
rambled a bit there. I don't know if that
Oh
answered
no,
the
you didn't. You maybe call it ramble if you'd like, but it was a brilliant answer. I mean, it was a brilliant answer because I couldn't agree more. Relationships in any aspect, be it business, be it personal marriage or whatever, to me, the communication is critical in every aspect. And when you talked about being honest, and in particular being honest with ourselves, communication is critical. You know, I've got a friend who says I strive to be humble enough so that I can be honest, and that strikes a chord with me. So you've lived in people may have picked up on this from the accent, but you've lived between South Africa, the UK, and the US. What have those moves changed in you, or if not changed, enhanced in you?
Yeah. And I've lived in Germany, I've lived in France. I feel very blessed that I've had the opportunity to experience so many different cultures. Plus, I've done a lot of traveling, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe. And so I've been exposed to other people and understanding their customs and what makes other people tick
Mhm.
and how they live, because it's different. And then the foods and then the traditions. I mean, there's so much out there that too gets me so excited, and just, I mean, love of traveling for me. And my mother always called me a gypsy because I always wanted to travel.
Well, my experience has been travel has been one of the greatest teachers in my life. And looking for the positives and looking for the similarities in other countries, other people, other traditions has done nothing but enhance my life. Was in all of that moving though, either geographically or internally, emotionally, was there a moment that you felt like you didn't belong in one place?
Funnily enough, it's a really interesting question. And I've often thought that I didn't belong in England, even though I grew up there. And I left when we got married, I was 21, and both my parents are immigrants. So it wasn't their country, but, I was the first, you know, UK citizen in the family. And I often felt I don't belong here. I didn't relate to the culture in the same way I was related to other cultures,
Hmm.
because my parents were from Europe and they spoke German at home. So it was living in England, but almost in a ghetto like environment. And yeah, I just felt I don't belong here. So, but I didn't realize that at the time, but it was in hindsight that I've thought that. So that's a great question. Thank you.
How did that help shape, Susan? How did that help shape how you see different people and how they present themselves and how they live?
Yeah. I think it's just a respect for other people, and that we're different, but yet there's so much of us that's the same.
Mm.
And I think you alluded to that a little bit yourself. One thing that's common in every country is smiling. Just smiling. If you can't speak the language, and I've been in many countries where you can't speak the language, but if you smile, somehow there's the connection. There's that little bit of rapport that you can build.
And that is, like you said, maybe one of, if not the most common language that we have is just a smile.
Just a
Just an
smile.
acknowledgement to whomever we see. Yeah, I see you and things are okay.
Yeah.
And you might not get that in return, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So beyond work, again, is just saying, I'm sorry, I've taken you out of your work mode.
Okay with that.
Well, is there something in your life that had nothing at all to do with your career, but changed how you see things?
Well, as you know, I'm actually married to a minister. So that is like a whole different life.
Mm.
And that is very, very separate from my business. And just that alone puts me in a whole different environment where who I am at work, nobody cares. Nobody cares that I was a trade show coach. Nobody cares that, I'm a book marketing mentor. Nobody cares. But then I'm looking at them and we're respecting each other and talking almost like a different language
Mm.
because I very rarely even mention my work because it has nothing to do, and they don't relate to it. They never, if I ever talked about for instance, when I was doing trade show work, they never understood what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand what I'm doing now. But that's okay. I don't care, because it's not important to that relationship.
And conversely, I suspect that there's a lot of things that those people are doing that you don't understand and wouldn't understand, and it's not relevant to the situation that you're in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's like two separate lives, and it's okay. And I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say two separate lives, but I'm not sure if it's two separate lives or just two different categories, two different environments, which you're the same person, but just some things are more appropriate in one versus the other. So yeah, it just reinforces to me, Susan, that we can, as humans, do a lot of different things. We don't have to, the phrase, pigeonhole ourselves, and we don't have to exclude others that aren't exactly like us.
Yes.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
Um, So for someone listening who feels like they're in something that no longer quite fits for them, but they're not sure whether they should leave or stay, how should they begin to think about that?
Start really doing some internal work and look at what is it that you want out of life? What do you really enjoy doing? So doing that, pros and cons, just sit down and do that exercise and really understand because again, life is so short. You mentioned you lost somebody quite recently. We've all lost people. Suddenly I heard something this morning that was devastating from a friend. And we just don't know from one minute to the next. So we've got to look at and be honest with ourselves and do it for us, not for somebody else, not what your parents want you to do, what anybody else, your spouse wants you to do, your friend wants you to do. It doesn't matter. What do you want to do? What lights you up? Is it a hobby? Is it a hobby that could potentially turn into a career? or is it best left as a hobby? Would
Mhm.
it take the enjoyment out of it?
Mhm.
So I think it's that just being very honest to yourself about, you and your life and
Mhm.
what you want from this life, because it's going very quickly. And as you get older, it gets quicker for some reason.
We both know that. We both know that firsthand, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah, there's phrase that I hear quite often, and it's true, thine own self be true. And
Exactly.
and it's, take the influence, take the input of parents, friends, relatives, kids, coworkers, whomever, take it all in. But at the end of the day, what we have to do is say what's best for us. And that oftentimes, to me, to build on what you're saying, I think two things. First of all, go through everything that you want, but go through everything you don't want. What is it in life that you really is driving you to feel like there's a change needed? And so maybe it's just isolating those things or that thing, whatever it might be. And can you change that as opposed to a major change? But either way, we have to get comfortable with the fact of getting out of our comfort zone. We have to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nothing's going to change.
Nothing's going to change. And yes, and there is so many people and organizations that can support you if doing that. But it's a matter of being brave
Mhm.
and just, as you say, being willing to get out of your comfort zone,
Mhm.
doing something different. I think that's really hard for people, is change, is really, they don't want to, they're fearful. And sometimes, I mean, I never even mentioned this, but I was laid off 3 times,
Mm.
and talk about uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and having to change and do things differently. And yeah, now that's why I like being my own boss, Bill. It's like, but mind you, I'm my hardest taskmaster.
Oh, agree with that. And it's nice when we can love our boss.
Yes. Most
So,
of the
Susan,
time.
I've got,
Most of the time, Bill.
yeah, most of the time, exactly. I've had just an absolute joyful time speaking with you. I appreciate your time and your insight. We've talked about building something. We've talked about staying with it. We've talked about how it changes over time, how to adapt, how to hold our ground. You've talked about what looks consistent from the outside is often a series of quiet shifts underneath. So after everything that you've seen and experienced in our conversation, here's the question that everyone on my show gets asked. Susan, from your view, what's the point?
What's the point? It's what you make of it is really what's the point. As my
Mm.
husband would say, what's the meaning of life? It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
it's just being grateful. I think gratitude for what you do have versus what you don't have, I think is really important. So if I can leave your listeners with that, just that feeling of gratitude.
Well, thank you for that. And what I've taken from our conversation today, Susan, is that staying with something isn't passive. We have to pay attention. We have to notice when our life's in it and when maybe we've kind of lost touch a little bit and the need to move. We need to recognize that longevity is anything. If anything, it's not about doing the same thing for years, but staying engaged is what you've said, staying motivated, staying in touch with that. So if there's something you're navigating in your own life, to my listeners, maybe the question is not whether to stay or to leave. Maybe it's whether you're still paying attention to what it has become.
Very much so.
And does that still align with to thine own self be true? And the question that this podcast asks you to think about every time you do is, what's the point? Thank you for listening, listeners. Susan, thank you so much for your
My
time. It's
pleasure.
been an absolute joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to What's the Point? If this conversation meant something to you, we hope you'll follow the show and share it with someone who might also benefit from it. And if you know a guest with a story worth exploring, send me a message, bill@billellis.com. I'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.